Here we are tuning in with Thom and Eliot Lewis. I guess we got to start with 6 months ago. I said we got to catch up in 6 months, but that was really 12 months ago.
Was it really? Has it been a
Yeah,
year already? Oh
it's been a
man.
year. It's been a year. And so if anybody goes back in the archives and they go, hey, where's that 6 month update? Well, here we are, six months
Yeah.
later, plus six.
Plus
But
six.
so we've got some
Yeah.
time obviously since the last time we talked, and I
Yeah.
guess we'll start at the current. I mean, you've had a lot going on. I think you might have gotten engaged and just all kinds of
I
good personal stuff. So we'll start there with congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. Tell us all about it.
It'd be happier. Yes, I met the woman of my dreams, and we're getting married shortly in about 5 weeks. We can't believe it's
Oh
coming up so
wow.
quickly. So, yeah, it's going to be a very, very, very small wedding, but it's going to be very special. I can't wait.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, glad to hear it. I'd offer my services as an officiant, but you probably already got somebody lined up. Cool.
We do actually. I didn't think of you, man. That might be a little bit of a drive too.
I mean, I would definitely do it for that, but yeah, but that's very cool. Well, I'm very, very happy for you. I know with certainly when it comes to musicians and
Yeah.
touring, I mean, it's got to be difficult to have just any kind of stability in terms of a relationship. So it's nice that you're able to kind of pull that off.
Yeah, she's certainly a very adept to the music business. She's been around it. She's been around people in the music business. She's incredibly musical and artistic person, so she totally understands the lifestyle and the work ethic and all that goes into it because she's sort of wired like that too. So it couldn't be a better balance. I've never had this kind of a balance in my life with a partner. So yeah, couldn't be happier. But you
Well,
make it work,
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
time on the road, and you have to have somebody that's understanding of that. But fortunately, she's able to come with me on some of the trips and tours and stuff, and we're like partners, partners in crime.
Yeah, I find, with my marriage, not that we're supposed to be a show all about marriage, but what makes my marriage work is not only the fact that we're good together, we're also good
Hmm.
apart. Like there's
Hmm.
times where we just need to do some things without the other one, and it doesn't feel like
Sure.
we're abandoning
Yeah.
the other one. So it's that partnership that you said, that understanding that, you know, sometimes I got to work it on a weekend or do this, that, or the
Hmm.
other thing, and it's like that's okay. You don't get the guilt trip about it.
Right, I mean, hopefully there's an understanding when you come together with somebody, and your careers and your paths are sort of they're already set, so that you kind of know what you're getting into. It's not like a sudden surprise and sudden shift in your lifestyle. So yeah, it's all good, man. I can't complain. I'm a happy guy.
So how has this influenced your approach to your? I mean, you're probably about a year and a half from
Hmm.
when you left the Daryl Hall and Hall and
Yeah,
Oates, I guess, simultaneously. So here
yeah.
you are, you're kind of a year and a half removed. In the meantime, you get engaged. I mean, where is the synergy in all this, and how has it changed you as both an
Hmm.
individual, but more importantly as a performer?
In all everything positive. So yeah, it's been about a year and a half that I left really Daryl's organization because it was clear to us a year prior to that that long before this stuff became public, with the lawsuit and stuff, we knew that they weren't going to work together. Something transpired, and whatever it was, I had to decide, and I did a year with just Daryl. Of course, we were out. I'm sure you saw some of those shows with Todd Rundgren, and that was great. But I had to decide really, do I want to continue as Daryl's side musician? And while the whole experience was great and positive, it was just time. I've been putting so much into my own career that it was sort of gaining some momentum enough where I thought this is the right time. And what a difference a year makes, because a year ago, when I first left, I had to figure a lot of things out. Like, okay, I need to, of course, there's the booking aspect of your career, managing your career. So, I was able to play some rooms and venues that I had been wanting to for years. But because I was working with them, and sometimes I wouldn't get their schedules till very short notice, I wouldn't be able to book and figure out and plan my own career the way I needed to. So now, a year and a half later, I'm able to book far in advance and plan things out much more precisely. And it's working out very well. I mean, last year, I think I did about 35 shows, proper ticketed shows all over the country. And this year I'm already over 50. I'll probably hit 60 to 65 shows this year. And it's not about the quantity of shows for me at all. It's about the quality of shows, the venues, getting to the right places that work for me. Because I'm still very much in the process of building up my own fan base. People are always like, they sometimes think that I'll be playing, a 1,000-seat theater in a city somewhere, and the fact is that I've been around a lot of very successful, famous people, but I'm not necessarily a famous person. I'm still very much, building my own fan base.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm getting the sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Mhm.
I'm getting the sense that your strategy, which seems to be working, is you go through, you introduce yourself, you put on a decent enough show. Let's say you get 50 people.
Mm.
The object
Yeah.
is that the following year you come back to the same venue, and those 50 people have said, "Oh man, you missed this guy last year. You got to
Yeah.
come to the show this year," and you're starting to build a relationship with the venues and the fan base of those particular venues. Has that been
Yeah.
what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's very much a big part of it. There's always going to be the word of mouth element that's always going to help a performer in areas, right? Somebody sees a show and then the following 6 months or year, that person says, "Oh, you've got to check out this guy who was really good," whatever the case may be. But there's a lot of different components. There's the word of mouth, there's the exposure, there's getting content out there, there's getting your music out there. And, honestly, as you know, there's so much out there. How
Mm-hmm.
many millions of songs are uploaded every day to Spotify and streaming services? And there's a lot of stuff out there for people to choose from musically. So, you have to try to find your own niche. And I'm really trying to be very conscious of finding a niche and a path that's very comfortable for me. I do this one-man show now. And it really all kind of roads led to this, what I'm doing right now. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, so I'm able to put together a show of different instruments and not only do my own music, but do songs and interpretations from all these people I've worked with. So in that sense, it's sort of unique and it's a little bit different than going to see, a three-piece blues band. Or, honestly, I'm competing really in the musical climate right now with tribute bands, as you probably
Mm-hmm.
are aware of. There's a tribute band for everybody, and not only is there a tribute band for every preceding artist, there's, a friend of mine that is a promoter in Florida that I work with said, there's I think she said, "You're not going to believe this." The number just blew my mind. She said there's 160 Journey tribute bands in Florida
Yeah.
alone. It's unbelievable. So, I don't have the luxury of having a famous person or group in my title. I'm not doing a tribute to Hall and Oates. I'm not doing a tribute to whomever, foreigner. I'm Eliot Lewis, so it's a bit of a struggle to get people familiar with what I'm doing when they don't know that name. But I'm very lucky. I have a nice little base around the
Mm-hmm.
country started, but it's always it's a challenge.
And your social media, I mean, you've been very smart with that too. Your email lists, you
Hmm.
just keep everything up to date. And the other thing too, and I know we talked about this the last time we got together, and probably every time we get together, but
Yeah,
just your ability to connect on a personal level with your fans. I mean, that's not something even a tribute band necessarily is able to do, because as a tribute band, you're just a Journey tribute. You're not Elliot
right.
Lewis. You're not Tom Jennings. You're the guy that's playing the Steve Perry or the Neil
Yeah,
Schon part. But
right.
but I think the personal element has got to be not only an important part, but that must be a part that's important to you as well, to just be able to
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
pound some flesh with these people.
Yeah, I've always been, I try to interact and communicate as much as possible. Obviously, I can't with every single message or email that comes
Mhm.
through. But I do really engage with a lot of my fans because a lot of them have been very supportive and they've been with me from the beginning. So it's important. I think it deserves a little bit of my time to interact a little bit when I can, of course. The problem for me is always time.
Yeah.
Doing
Yeah.
what I do and trying to manage a solo career like this is really a 24/7. I mean, I basically stop working at midnight every night. That's, you know,
Yeah.
that's how time consuming it is. But I do love to connect with people. That's the whole thing. That's the whole driving force behind what I do is, especially playing smaller venues. Obviously, I'm not out playing Hall and Oates size venues. I'm playing smaller, intimate rooms, listening rooms, some small performing arts centers. Is I get a chance to really connect one-on-one with people a lot more. So that to me is what I live for.
Well, I wonder at some point if it's going to make sense for you. I know you have done it in the past where you like you've opened up for Hall and Oates or
Yeah,
anything, or maybe catch on a bigger tour or something
yeah.
that would make sense. But and musically, it's funny. I was just listening to some stuff today with my wife Tracy, and speaking of wives, and I don't know why I hadn't really thought of this before, but I realized that your music is actually a lot more influenced and closer to the average white band era than
Mm,
it is to Hall and Oates. I mean, and maybe it's because of the
mm-hmm,
guitar as opposed to the keyboards,
mm-hmm.
but I don't know if that's conscious or if you've ever really thought about it. But I would peg you more as like, oh, this music is very close to. It's got that great funk. It's got that great
Hmm.
groove, and you still have this a little bit of the soul from the Hall and Oates era, but it really
Yeah,
does to me feel like very more AWB than any other project that you've worked on.
that's interesting observation. I mean, it's really, I think all of us that are doing our own music is an amalgamation of all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff we grew up with and that penetrated our ears and our eyes early on. So there's definitely some soul because that's something I love growing up. It was so diverse, my influences, obviously we know you're a big Todd Rundgren fan. There was
Mm-hmm.
Todd Rundgren, there was David Bowie, there was
Yep.
Alice Cooper, but then there was also the Who and all the British stuff, of course, because my older brothers were turning me on to all this great music. But then there was also slide playing, and there was Stevie Wonder playing, and then there was some blues stuff playing. And then, of course, I joined Average White Band, and that made a real big impact on me because that was sort of my first really high level professional gig. And I was traveling the world and we were playing with Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire and James Brown and Isley Brothers and some amazing artists. So that really sunk in. So it's definitely a piece and part of what I love musically. But I love rock and I love, you know, I love stuff with soul and that's rhythmic. My first instrument is drums. So I can't get away from the fact that I want to hear something very groove based. So that might come across, might, your average white band connection there. That's probably pretty close.
Oh yeah, I mean, anytime I hear your song, I get that kind of that toe tapping. I mean, it's
Yeah,
also, I think I mentioned before, sometimes I hear even like a little bit of AC/DC too. There's a sort of AC/DC
yeah,
sensibility to it in terms of the rock
yeah.
component. But you're right, it always does have that, it just fits into the groove. And that's probably why you're able to even pull off this one man band thing, because you are setting the groove before
Mm.
you play the song individually. That's not pre-programmed,
Hmm.
correct?
Correct. For 2 years now, basically, I've been completely 100% live. I used to use some backing tracks and I would play over that and I would adapt certain instruments over that. But for 2 years now, I've been completely 100% completely live. Nothing pre-recorded or no backing tracks or drum machines. I play everything live. So I play drums on a kit, an electronic drum kit with sticks, and I'm triggering a bass drum with my foot, like kind of like I would with a real drum kit. And I want to get it to the point where I can bring out an acoustic drum kit. It's just it's the production,
Yeah.
the level of production, and as a one-man show right now, preventing that. But at least everything is played live. The guitar is all live. I play bass parts. I'm singing. Sometimes I'll incorporate a three-part harmony, or some harmony to my vocals. So the good thing about it is it's very spontaneous. I generally have an idea or a set list of what I'm going to do at a particular venue, but because I'm doing this, I can change it on the moment, in the moment. And I can stop a song short, I can extend a song, I can morph two songs into each other. And that's the best part about it, is it keeps me on my toes and it keeps it fresh for me. And the audience generally can see that. They can see that, oh, something really unexpected just happened. So it's cool. But, when you're relying on technology, though, there's always a little bit of, you never know what's going to happen. I'm using foot pedals to engage the recording, and sometimes you hit something wrong, or you're in the moment and your adrenaline is going. But, I've always said for a while now, I think the imperfections in a performance are way more interesting than the perfection. I mean, I've toured with Hall and Oates and other bands for years with high level bands that use so much backing track that most people wouldn't know. Because there's great musicians on stage playing, but there's also a lot of pre-programmed stuff. So they're just basically filling in. A lot of people don't know that they're hearing a lot of backing tracks. So there's something very spontaneous and raw about this approach. And it's not for everybody. People that ask me about looping, usually people that do it are doing it in a very minimal way. They're playing an acoustic guitar and maybe creating a rhythm. And, my idea was to try to really create a band experience doing this. So
Yeah, what it reminds me of is that like what I really loved about going to see the Grateful Dead before, the new era where the guy walks out with a guitar or whatever, is you'd see them and they'd be tuning, and then, the drummer be drum, and
yeah,
sort of the song at the very beginning would start forming, and then you have
yeah,
that aha moment where it's like,
hmm
you're saying, okay, I'm going to play a song, and then you listen to the rhythm and you go, well, is it this one? Is it adventure? Is it, is it,
hmm
ready for love? What is it? And then when you have that
hmm
aha moment, it's like, oh yeah, that's
yeah,
what it is. And I think that initial discovery of the groove and the song really enhances the performance, and it's
hmm
unique. It really is what kind of makes you stand out in
It's
terms of
a
the one man show.
Yeah, it's a little different. Everything I do now is a different version of how it used to be. Being that I'm doing this, some things are much more stripped down. Sometimes it's just guitar and drums. The bass is gone, then I bring the bass back. But then sometimes some elements, some parts of the songs get even bigger because I'm able to overdub and layer things in a much bigger way. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of dynamic, I think, in it, and yeah, it's cool. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and anybody, anybody who gets a chance to see Elliot, please do. You're really going to enjoy this. You're not going to be disappointed. And everybody always leaves smiling, and you get to meet him at the end of the show too, because you always comes out, unless you got a cold or something, I suppose, where it's like, stay away from me, I can't
Yeah,
afford to get sick. But that
yeah,
happens sometimes too. Well, we've tapped into your solo stuff, and before we move on to some other heritage stuff, where I want to
yeah.
get some stories from you. What's the newest project? What are you out promoting right now? What do you need people to get?
Well, I've really just been focused on the show and incorporating some new material to it. I don't know if you've heard of a record or have it, an instrumental record called Sonic Soldier. It's really now I have a lot of, self-released EPs and CDs. And my latest is, of course, is Anything is Possible. And that's got a couple of new singles on it. But I have an instrumental record that never really was officially released.
Hmm.
So I'm basically very close to releasing that, and it's my one and only CD that's all instrumental. All of my CDs are mostly vocal, normal kind of stuff, but this one CD is all instrumental. And it taps into my Jeff Beck influences and my early, that sort of British kind of stuff, very guitar focused, using the guitar for the melodies instead of singing. So that's coming on. It's called Sonic Soldier, and and then there's a lot of new material. It's just there'll be another record at the end of this year for sure, which will be sort of almost like my best of. I'll be taking songs that really don't have a home and haven't been released and adding some new songs to them. And but that'll probably come out late fall, early winter, something like that.
Any plans for vinyl?
I would love to do vinyl. I would love to do. I mean, I'm looking into it.
Yeah.
If there's a demand for it, then absolutely. I don't personally get a lot of requests for vinyl, but I'll be hitting the road. I'm packing my bags right now for a 2.5 week tour, so I'll try to get some feedback in that area. I mean, I
And
always carry.
put it in the comments, everybody, because
Yeah, put it on the comments. You want vinyl?
we want vinyl. Oh
Okay.
man, I
I
love my
still love
vinyl.
vinyl. I mean, I love vinyl. It's what we all grew up with. I
Oh
did.
yeah.
I'm sure you did. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. This whole room is just a cluster of vinyl. But
Yeah.
so I was scrolling through Facebook the other day, just some
Yeah.
old stuff, and I in my feed I joked with my wife. I said, Elliot's like Waldo. He just shows up in my feed every now and then. And it was an old Daryl Hall performance of, man, I want to say Kiss on My List, but it was of all places in the Howard Stern studios, and I was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, is Elliot with him? And sure enough, I think it was just the three of you that were there for that
Yeah.
particular performance. Any memories of hanging out with the king
Very
of
much
all
so.
media?
Very much so. I know I did it twice with Daryl. There may have been one with John, but the one you're referring to, I think, is with just Daryl. So I actually was out on a tour, and I was somewhere in the Midwest, probably Ohio, when the call came in to say, "Hey guys," or it was just a few of us, like you said, "We need you for a Howard Stern show." Came up very quickly, and I'm like, I'm in Ohio. It's in New York. I can't drive back to make that. It's like a day, the next day. So they flew me, and I happened to have the day off. I didn't have a show on this particular day. So I got there and did the show with them. And I mean, he's a character. And I will never forget that he's interviewing Daryl, of course. And then for some bizarre reason, he turns the mic on me and he said, "So, Elliot, you've been working with Daryl a long time. What's he like? Is he really a jerk? Is he a good guy?" And of course, Daryl looks at me, half kidding, half smiling. He's like, "Be careful what you say." So I was sort of put on the spot, and had no idea, never expected, Howard to want to talk to me and do a mini interview with me, but that happened. So it was fun. Yeah.
Well, now
Been a
I'm going to
lot
put
of,
you. I'm going to put you on the spot though, because it's interesting you bring that up, because as we know, there's been this lawsuit between Daryl and John, and I will say, from
yeah,
my perspective as a music writer, I wasn't all that shocked. I mean, if you read between the lines of both of their interviews over the last, I don't know, decade, and I think even
yeah,
on the "Do It for Love" album, there's
yeah,
about 5 or 6 tracks that John isn't even on, and
yeah.
that's 15 years ago. I mean, I don't know. I didn't get the sense that they didn't like each other, but I also never got the sense that they were the best buddies that everybody might have hoped that a musical duo was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I always sort of thought they had a pretty healthy relationship. And I'm being honest with you, from the start of joining them, they were very much a team. And people would ask me once in a while, like, "Hey, knowing I'm in Hall and Oates, like, hey, those guys don't get along, right? They take separate buses and they fight a lot, right?" I was like, "Actually, no, they get along fine. I've never seen them fight, but I just think they're very, very different and very much individual. And I think, you know, they both, Daryl in particular, once has always tried to focus on his own identity and never be, a part of a piece of something, but more exist in his own world. And I don't blame him. I mean, he's a great, great songwriter. He's an amazing talent. Um, but it was obvious to me that something happened long before the lawsuit. So I had to sort of, you know, figure out what I was going to do, how I was going to move forward. It was apparent that Hall and Oates, Daryl and John, were not going to work anymore together. And so I stayed on one more year with Daryl and did the Todd Rundgren tour, and but just decided it was the right time for me to move on. I had been thinking about it honestly for about 6 or 7 years. That long, I was sort of looking for you know, an exit plan, and so it was just the right time. But you know, it's kind of sad that it got public. My feeling is they probably didn't want it to become public. But of course, there's people out there who search for celebrities that have lawsuits and stuff, and instantly make it very well known, and it becomes viral and stuff. So I hope they work it out, whatever it is, and I wish them both well. You know, I talked to John a little bit, and he seems to be very, very happy with his life and career right now. And you know, I wish them all well. I had a great time. It was an amazing 20 years for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the way you put it is probably the way that makes the most sense. Is that well, I mean, I heard this quote from somebody the other day. I'm going to try to get this quick without sounding too jumbled,
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
say that as you get older, your better qualities tend to get better, and your bad qualities tend to get worse. But
mm,
so, I mean, if there's a point when you're young and you got two
hmm,
people that are very different, you know, and there's things about the other one that maybe drive the other one crazy. I feel like when you get to a certain age, that just becomes
hmm,
so amplified because of
yeah,
both of
yeah,
your personalities that it could come down to a clash. But even like you said, with wanting to have your own musical identity,
yeah,
I mean, that was the same thing with you. You know, you don't want to spend the rest of your life as Hall and Oates's
yeah,
keyboard player. You need to be
yeah.
Elliot Lewis at some point. You
Yeah,
know, whether
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I never, you know, in my journey, I never set out to be like just a musician. I mean, there are many, many people that's the end game for them, is to play an instrument or multiple instruments. For me, early on, it was always about songwriting. It was always about creating song, creating an art form, and expressing that. So to be an artist, that was always my intention from probably like 16 or 17 years old. So, but I had these offers, and of course, it's very hard to turn down an offer from Daryl Hall to join Hall and
yeah,
Oates. You know, and I've said this many times, you probably know, you know, when he asked me to join the band, it was the keyboard position that was open because they had a guitar player. And of course, Daryl and John both play guitar, and T-Bone was playing some guitar, so they needed a keyboard player. So that's why it stuck for me, and I assumed that role. But you know, it's as they say, it's all good. You know, I had some great times, and honestly, probably stayed in it longer than I anticipated or would have, really because of Daryl's show, and that happened only about 3 or 4 years after joining the band. But I kind of thought when I first joined, maybe I'll do this for 5 years. It'd be a great 5 year, you know, chapter in my career in my life. But then the show started, and all of a sudden I'm working with everybody,
yeah.
and that was an amazing situation to be working with, you know, Smokey Robinson one week, and Todd Rundgren, and Joe Walsh, and Billy Gibbons, and Cheap Trick, and so many of my heroes. So that was a really special time.
And one of the last ones you worked with was Robert Fripp.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. As a music writer, like if Robert, I mean, there's a few of them that would just get me into that, you know, Chris Farley interviewing Paul McCartney mode. Like, I feel like if I met
Yeah.
Robert Fripp, I'd be like, you're Robert Fripp. I mean,
I
what
know.
was it? What was it like? I mean, he's a very eccentric kind of guy too. I mean, what was it like for that particular show?
Very eccentric, and I didn't know really anything about him. I knew that Daryl had a long relationship with him because he produced one of his solo
Right.
records. Um, and he always talked about Robert Fripp, but I was sort of, I didn't really know what to expect. I guess I was probably a little intimidated by the legend of Robert Fripp and what he's created, and his musical abilities are just, you know, legendary. But then before we did the episode, somebody told me about these YouTube videos he does with his wife, and I
Yeah.
watched one or two, and I was like, okay, this guy has actually got a great sense of humor. He does not
Oh
taking
yeah.
himself, at least at this point in his life, too seriously. So sure enough, he was an absolute sweetheart. I mean, he was so nice and he was so chill. Um, and he also gave us an incredible compliment when we did that song Red, which was a piece of work, man. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it pushed me into an area of playing keys I never thought I would go to, at least not willingly. Um, and he said, and when it came time on the day to run that down before we filmed it, because we did it once. We did it once before it was taped, and that was it. And we ran it down, and Daryl was like, "All right, should we try this? Let's try it." We did it, and it was pretty flawless. And Robert, after we got done with the song, he said, "I have to let you guys know that when we get King Crimson back together, we spend about 2 weeks on that song." And he said, "You just nailed it one time through, first take." So
Wow.
that felt good. There were some parts in there that are just so interesting. They don't really follow a form. So there was, I memorize stuff anyway. I'm not a reader. I don't read notated music. So I typically am memorizing everything. But there was a extra level and layer of what I had to remember in that song in particular. But he's great. He's great. A lot of respect for him.
Yeah, that was a great episode. I mean, King Crimson is, I mean, they're just one of my favorite bands. And boy, I mean, their catalog is
Yeah.
so unique. But
Yeah.
I mean, looking back now at all the live from Daryl's house shows, I mean, what are maybe the two or three standouts that you just still have maybe
Mhm.
some pinch me moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm playing with this guy.
Yeah. There's about three or four that are always equal, and people ask me what was my favorite episode. But there are about three or four that are take the same place, and that of course is Todd Rundgren. We worked with him twice. It was Cheap Trick because they were childhood heroes of mine. I discovered them when I was 14 years old or 15 or whatever, and I've always loved them. And Joe Walsh and Billy Gibbons. I would say all those four were pinch me moments. There were a lot of incredible other experiences and artists. Most of them were all incredible, but those meant the most to me, personally. So, but so many. Train, KT Tunstall, Grace Potter. Um, there's so many. Smokey
Yeah,
Robinson. I mean, that was incredible. CeeLo. Um, yeah,
yeah. I mean, the list is incredible. I just interviewed Pat
yeah.
Monahan from Train. What was it
Nice.
I think it was last week. So I'll be seeing him on the 19th. He's one. I mean, I'll tell you, and I'm a Todd Rundgren fan, and I'm gonna say something semi blasphemous, but I think his version of "Wait for Me" I prefer over Todd's, and they both did an amazing job. But Pat's was on another stratosphere. I mean, it
It
was just
was. It
incredible.
was. That's really good observation because that was one of the best, most finely captured moments on the show. That version of Wait for Me. I mean, I got goosebumps during that. It was one of the times where it's like, oh, that was really special. Whatever just happened there. The way they followed each other and the way they interacted together was, he's great. I can't say enough about Pat. He's a fun guy. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and he knows, I think, how to really um, work with his band. And he seems to have gotten even more like really supporting his band and really putting them out there. It's not making it all about himself. He really loves, I think, the idea of it being a band. So I pass off to him. He's a great songwriter too for what he
Oh
does.
yeah. Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure. He always picks good collaborators too. I think I think you kind of have to be able to set aside your ego to
yeah,
work with somebody else, but you always need to find somebody that's a good writing partner. I mean, I think you worked with Tommy Shaw, for example. I always see
yeah,
Tommy
yeah.
Shaw as the same way. Like Tommy's a great co-writer. He
Hmm.
always needs somebody to maybe add a little bit more, but that's not taking anything away from him as a songwriter.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Some people are better at collaboration than just a sole songwriter, you know. Yeah, everybody is different, but he's great. I remember playing in, we did because Train and Hall and Oates did a tour together, a whole summer together. And we
Oh,
were in,
that's right.
Yeah, we were in Boston. I think we were in Boston, and of course he must have had some connection or somebody from Aerosmith was there, and he did Dream On with the band. And I was
Wow.
like, oh my God. And he just killed it. I mean, it was flawless. He hit those notes at the end. So it's pretty impressive. So
Yeah, he did a whole album of Led Zeppelin covers, and I didn't realize until I was doing
yeah.
the research for the interview that he was in a Led Zeppelin cover band in Erie, Pennsylvania before he moved out
Hmm.
to San Francisco. But there's a guy you should call and say, "Hey, Pat, find a spot for me on your tour." You guys would
I
be
I
very
know. Yeah.
compatible together in terms of. But he's out this summer with Yacht Rock Review, which is opening, and of course REO Speedwagon, which is a little bit of an
Hmm.
odd combination, but
Hmm.
REO is a
Yeah.
great band.
It works, you know. I think it's all in the same, you know. If you like one, you're probably going to like the other. And I have to say one more thing about Pat I was very impressed with is that every day it was an arena tour. We were in arenas every show, and he brought in a treadmill. There was a treadmill in the hallway right outside of their dressing room, and he'd be on it for like nearly an hour warming up. And I
Wow.
just thought, well, that's a commitment to your craft, is to be, want to be in that physical shape to be able to put on that show and sing of that level. So very cool.
Well, I'm sure you've realized there's a balance on the road as far as trying to keep yourself healthy just to make it
Yeah,
through, especially
yeah,
a particularly long tour. Um,
yeah.
we'll close up. As I mentioned, we just popped into my head. I mentioned the term yacht rock. I mean, there's a lot of in addition to just like tribute
Hmm.
bands, there seems to be this whole kind of yacht rock revival as well. Which I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd fall into the yacht rock category per se, but I mean, Todd's been kind of lumped in there. Hall and Oates has been in there. Certainly, some of the stuff that we've mentioned before. I mean,
Hmm.
what's your opinions on the resurgence of the yacht rock
It's
genre?
interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon, and I don't mind it because some of that music is great. And
Agree.
obviously Hall and Oates are in there. You'll hear She's Gone and Rich Girl and that kind of stuff attached to the yacht rock. I don't mind it. And there's a band that I discovered, maybe you've heard of them, and they're an original band. I think they're a British band, but they are very much immersed in that sound. I think they're called Young Guns and Silver Fox.
Oh, I'll have to
You've
check
heard of
them out.
them?
I
Oh
have
my
not heard of
God.
them.
Very, very much in the template of the yacht rock. Maybe even slightly more Steely Danish, but really very, very musical. Very cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because yacht rock came out, I guess, as a pejorative, but yet it's then somebody finally realized that, oh no, yacht rock's great music. So
It is.
it's
Yeah.
it really
It's so,
is.
I don't know, it's sort of easy listening, it's stuff that you would hear on commercial radio stations, but there's a lot of great songs that are attached to that genre.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's some of the stuff that I listened to that I put into my playlist. Well, you did that wonderful version of "Love Is Alive" by Gary Wright, which is,
Yeah,
I think, falls nicely into that category. But like Pablo Cruz, what you gonna do? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, like,
I Tom, I did a show recently. I'm very good friends with one of the ex-bass player for Bad Company, and he has a venue down in Delaware, and I play his venue all the time. And he has a band that is himself and an ex-member of Little River Band, and so they have me come and do these shows because I'm attached to Hall and Oates, and so we did the show recently. I've done a couple with them, and the amount of songs that Little River Band had, I mean,
oh
Lonesome
yeah.
Loser. I mean, that's very much in that yacht rock, I guess, world, but just some incredible songs. So I love it.
Well, maybe you three should get together and come up with a catchy yacht
Yeah,
rock name, and hit the
yeah,
road as a yacht
yeah.
band.
Well, I'm probably going to do some more shows with them. Right now they're called the Bad River Band, part
Oh,
Bad
that is that
Company,
is
part Little
that
River
is
Band. So
hilarious.
maybe we'll work in the Hall and Oates connection in there somehow and do a
Yeah.
couple of shows. But they're very good musicians and the material is great. I love Bad Company and now having gotten back into some Little River, it's like, well, it's great stuff.
Yeah, you did that Bad Company cover, and oh my gosh. I mean, other than Rough Diamonds, which
Yeah.
was a pretty pretty difficult ending for that classic lineup. And I actually like some of the Brian Howe stuff, but it's definitely an entirely different band. But
Hmm.
that first lineup was incredible, absolutely incredible.
You mean a Bad Company?
A Bad Company, yeah. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah,
The Paul Rogers era stuff was
yeah,
just phenomenal. But
yep.
yeah, I think they wound up having at least two other lead singers after Rogers, but it was just so different. It was weird.
I
But
remember, man, I remember early on with the Average White Band, and now it's very common, but I remember being on tour with the Average White Band. We were doing some festival somewhere. I can't remember where it was. Excuse me. And Bad Company was on the bill. And so I was like, oh, it was before we played or something. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go run over and see their stage and watch some Bad Company. And I asked somebody in production, I said, so who is it? Mick Ralphson? Is it, Paul Rogers? Who's in the band right now? And they said, there's no original members.
yeah,
It's all new members. And they were out as Bad Company. This is back probably around 2000 or
yeah, there was a
1999, something
lawsuit
like that.
involved with that one. I think it was I can't remember. It was like the guy that was a lead singer on one of the records and three other people. And I think that was the impetus of Rogers getting back together because he was so
Oh,
angry that there was
mm-hmm.
another group on the road capitalizing on and,
Yeah.
it's like these issues with the Guess Who now and everything. I think people don't realize that a legacy to musician is very important. Your music is a part of your identity, and if
Yeah.
somebody else is going to present it, you want it to be presented in a loving and honest way. Like you said, you were
Yeah.
walking over to see Bad Company. You want to see
Yeah.
Bad Company.
Exactly. Well, sadly, though, I think there's much less emphasis put on the actual players and musicians.
Oh,
I
100%.
think
Yeah.
back in the 70s and 80s, it was very important to see the people that wrote that song and that went through that journey, and those are the guys. Now it doesn't seem to matter with the advent of tribute bands. I mean, Foreigner are out playing arenas, right? With
Yep.
Journey. There's no original members in Foreigner. There's no
Yep.
original members. It's sanctioned, I guess, by um, the guitar player, but it's kind of crazy, that there's bands that are playing arenas now that they're no original members. They're new members.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Leonard
it's
Skinner falls in that category. You got
yeah,
Yes. I mean, granted, they have Steve Howe, but they don't have any original members. I mean, Styx is down to one.
yeah,
REO technically doesn't have any, although Cronin was the voice of the classic lineup. But yeah,
right.
it's funny because like certain bands were very sacrosanct in that way. Like you had the Beatles. I mean, it's those four guys. And granted, they played
Hmm.
a tour without Ringo when he was
Hmm.
ill. But I mean, would you wonder today if John Lennon was alive? I mean, it could if you just had Lennon and McCartney and then a drummer and a
Hmm.
guitarist,
Hmm.
they could go out as the Beatles and people would
Sure.
accept it.
Well, yeah, because that's a big chunk of the Beatles and a big
Yeah,
creative element of the Beatles. But I think it's different. I think it's a little sad that it's gone that way. That
agreed.
we're not nurturing new original artists. We're not nurturing the next Todd Rundgren. We're not nurturing the next David Bowie or Stevie Wonder. We're nurturing bands that have already done something for decades. And I get it. We can't go out and maybe see Fleetwood Mac there, so there's 10 Fleetwood Mac tribute bands that you can go see. I personally, I think it's a little silly. The whole dress up thing, it's like an impersonator. It's like Vegas. That's how I equate it.
Yeah.
But God bless them, man. They're making a living and they're keeping some music alive. But I wish there was a little bit more focus on original artists for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the issue with rock music, why it's kind of gotten to the point where, the generation behind him doesn't necessarily exist. Because I know you were
Yeah.
a Kiss fan, and
Oh
Kiss
yeah.
had Styx open up for him, and
Yeah.
Foreigner, and
Yeah.
Rush, and all these bands, and
Cheap
then
Trick
you would
and
think that
AC/DC.
Cheap
Yeah.
Trick, all of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they brought on that next generation, but now it's all about a 3 or 4 song
Yeah.
package of
Yeah.
classic rock bands, and they don't even have local or regional support to even
Hmm.
expose these bands with original material to potentially to new audiences. And country
Hmm.
music, country music gets that because they still do that. They still
Hmm.
follow that same model
Yeah,
where
very much so.
you're going to get an unknown guy, you're going to get a guy that's got one hit on the radio, and then you're going
Hmm.
to get the headliner. And
Right.
then the next year the guy was mid-level, it's almost like a multi-level marketing
Exactly.
scheme,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
But,
but
it affords some people some exposure and gives them a shot at,
oh yeah.
getting, building an audience. And if it's good stuff, it's good music, and it's a good presentation, then so be it, you know?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of guys they will play in tribute bands to pay the bills because tribute
Hmm.
bands get paid, and then
Yeah.
they'll try to use that to maybe further some of their original projects, which becomes a huge challenge, as you know.
Yeah.
It's just not easy
Yeah.
out there.
It's not.
So awesome.
Exactly.
Well, Elliot, a pleasure as always, and congratulations in advance for your upcoming wedding. Hopefully, you have some pictures on social media for us to share. You have a
I'm
lovely bride,
sh
as I'm sure you
she
know. So give her
she is.
congratulations from me as well.
I will. Always great to see you, Tom.
All right. Thank you very much, my friend. And everybody, thanks for tuning in with Tom. Don't forget Elliot, ElliotLewis.com, right?
That's it.
Okay. Awesome.